Great. Now I think you have to make me presenter, please.
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
You're on top of things. Okay, here we go.
So I'll start introducing you now if you want to go and change your slide, Anne-Marie. So greetings and welcome to today's education program, part 3 of our 3 vital question series. What actions are you taking? Shifting from reacting to creating by Anne-Marie Flynn. This is your moderator, Shobha Mittal with ASQ's Quality Management Division. Today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Anne-Marie Flynn. Please join me in welcoming her. Anne-Marie Flynn is the president and founder of the Champion Foundation Change Agency, which is the gold standard in workplace excellence. A professional consultant, personal and professional development expert in organizational and human performance, Anne-Marie demonstrates a spark for storytelling and a knack for normalizing fear and adversity. Champion Foundation Change Agency has served thousands of individuals, nonprofits, and cutting-edge businesses throughout North America, tailoring impactful workshops and professional development and customized strategies to create a fulfilling relationship with self and profitable and productive value within the workplace. Anne-Marie's dream of expanding the potential of workplace well-being finally came to a reality when in 2018, she requested and accepted an early retirement from a 29-year career with a Fortune 100 company. She knew that in order to live her life purpose, she needed to step outside of her comfort zone of a long and successful career and take the leap into the unknown of her business. Her faith in her life purpose provided the backbone and assurance that she would be a success. Her many credentials include Certified Workplace Wellness Ambassador, Certified 3 Vital Questions Facilitator, Professional Leadership Development and a Proactive Coach, Certified Nutritional Coach, Certified Corporate Athlete Facilitator, Bachelor of Commerce graduate from Dalhousie University, Vice President of a nonprofit organization, a top-ranked international athlete, Atlantic Canada's first female military scuba diver, a mom, and a business owner, Anne-Marie embodies a passion for making a difference in the lives of people from all walks of life to embrace and empower physical, mental, emotional, and intentional well-being. And so, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Anne-Marie Flynn. Anne-Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shobha, and welcome everybody to the 3rd and final installment of this 3-part series of managing driving process through 3 vital questions. So I just want to thank everybody. I don't know what the weather's like in your neck of the woods. It's certainly nice here, but thank you to everybody that has taken some time to attend this final session. So I'm sure many of you have already been to my first 2 talks, and as usual, you're probably used to this by now, but I jam-pack a lot of information in a very short period of time. So I really hope that the information that I do have here is useful and informative and improves the workplace culture and relationships within them. And my hope is that if you could only take away one nugget of information, that it has impact in your world and those around you. Now, one thing I want to note is that these webinars are really meant to be a starting point with some hopefully easy and uncomplicated tips that will help you with psychological safety and a new way of thinking about your mindset. And if you are looking for deeper work around this or any other wellness topics, please reach out to me, and I've highlighted my email and my website here on the bottom left of the screen. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a very quick overview of the 3 vital questions. The first 2 I'll quickly overview before getting into the 3rd of those questions, the 3rd question. And before I get into that, I'll also talk a little bit about the brain and stress. And then I'll get into the 3rd vital question, which is, what actions are you taking? And then I'll also talk about some very commonly asked questions that I get in a lot of these types of talks. So before you get to some of these questions, I might actually be able to provide an answer for you already. So hang tight and let's see what happens. So let's talk very briefly about the first of the vital questions. So recall the mindset model, which is, sorry, the first question is, where are you putting your focus? And recall the mindset model where there was the problem mindset and the outcome mindset. And this was the first of the three of the vital questions that in this series. And if you remember, I talked about the story of my military scuba diving course and reviewed with you how if I looked at deciding on taking this course with a problem mindset, how I would have chosen, or more accurately, not have chosen to take this course. Because when I only focused on the problems, which if you remember was my claustrophobia and not really being a big fan of the water, I would feel anxious and would react with my fears. And this would have kept me in a drama-filled mindset of fear and negativity. Now, when I focused on the desired outcome of becoming Atlantic Canada's very first female military scuba diver, I focused on my passions and I took baby steps to see the achievements I was making along the way. And this kept me in an empowerment or champion mindset. So this story really shows you how your mindset can define your reality. So that was around the first question of where do you put your focus. And then the next talk that we did was on question number 2, how are you relating? So in this second webinar, I reviewed this question. And I mentioned that the problem mindset we now call the victim mindset, if for no other reason than people feel victimized by problems and situations that arise in their lives. And when they feel victimized by their situation, they naturally relate through what is called the dreaded drama dynamic. Now, in the 1960s, Dr. Stephen Cartman first coined the name the drama triangle, which was sometimes called the Cartman drama triangle. I'm just going to shorten it to DDT because I tend to go, my tongue gets tied every time I try to say dreaded drama triangle. So the DDT includes 3 main roles: the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. And those roles can be found both internally and externally. And each of us all have these roles within us in the DDT. And the roles in the DDT are pretty much aligned to the 3 ways children respond to fear. So moving away can be like the victim, moving toward can be rescuing, and pushing against can be persecuting. Now, the antidote to the DDT is called the empowerment dynamic, or TED. And there are also 3 roles in this dynamic: the creator, which is the opposite of the victim, the challenger, which is the opposite of the persecutor, and the coach, which is the opposite of the rescuer. So the question really becomes, which voice do you tune into? And the DDT roles are tuned into a radio frequency that screeches and shouts at you using fear to motivate and get your attention, kind of like what was happening to me when I was in the fear type of and problem mindset when I was going into my scuba diver's course. And the TED roles are tuned into a station of empowerment and resourcefulness and resilience. I call it a champion mindset. It has a quality of truth and well-being, even when life is challenging. And this is more of a whisper on the radio station, which is your softer intuition that will guide you if you pause just long enough to listen to it. So that's a quick little Reader's Digest Pulse notes of those first 2 questions. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the 3rd vital question, and that is, what actions are you taking? Are you reacting to the problems of the moment, or are you taking creative action in service of outcomes? And how will you know? So if you recall, I sent out this to the group, is that it was called Shifting to a Champion Mindset, to help you shift from the DDT, the drama dynamic, the drama triangle, to the empowerment dynamic. Now, if we have an automatic default to be in either victim, persecutor, or rescuer mode, it can be a challenge to shift over to the creator, the challenger, and or the coach mindset. I call, again, the champion mindset. So I'm not here to tell you that shifting over to a champion mindset is easy. And just a quick little story about my lovely husband who is not here. He's downstairs making dinner actually right now, so I don't know if he can hear me or not. But there was one time that I was having a really anxious situation in my life, and I was explaining to him what was showing up for me in terms of the anxiety that I was having. I was deep into the dreaded drama triangle where I was feeling like a victim, and I wanted to rescue something or a situation, and I started to even persecute and feel resentment around the entire situation. And my lovely husband, all he said was, well, just don't think that way. And that was his anecdote. And the first thing I could think of before pausing and really think about what I really wanted to say was, wouldn't it be that easy? Wouldn't life be wonderful if all we needed to do was just shift our mindset and just not think that way? I have to say that as much as we would love to be able to do that, that thought is simple. It doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. Now, I've mentioned before, whether we like to admit it or not, we have all been in the DDT at some point in our lives. And it can be a natural default when our brain senses perceived danger or threat. And this is because our brain is wired to be on the lookout for danger. And it cannot distinguish the difference between real danger and perceived danger. So let's just review quickly the neurology of the brain. So there's three main parts of the brain. Now, I'm just going to say, please note, I am not a neuroscientist or a brain surgeon, so this is going to be a real, very layman's lesson on the old noodle. So, as I mentioned, there's three main parts to the brain. There's the reptilian brain, which has been around the longest. Hence, it's why it's sometimes referred as the primitive brain or the lizard brain. And that part of our brain has a really very important role to play, and that's to identify danger so we can either fight, we can flee, we can freeze, or we can appease. And this happens in milliseconds and without any processing time to think, which is good. Because when we were cave people and a saber-toothed tiger was about to attack us, we don't really want to be spending much time processing on how to respond to this real danger. I highly doubt we would be around for very long on this earth if we spent any time analyzing and building this spreadsheet around a situation like this. Now, in modern times, when stress levels are high, this part of our brain still does not distinguish the difference between real danger and perceived danger. It just simply responds to the body's stresses and registers this as danger and goes into an action to help the person survive. And so this really lines up with the first of the three vital questions in terms of where are you putting your focus? Is it on the problem or is it on the outcome? And then there is what's called the limbic system. And this is where we house all of our emotions. So if we are in a stress-inducing situation, which has the primitive brain perceive danger or a threat to our lives, it will receive that information and interpret the signal to determine the emotion or response that we will bring forth in our life. Which again, this lines up to the second of the vital questions on how are you relating? Are you relating as a victim, a persecutor, or a challenger? Or are you relating as a creator, a coach, and, as a challenger, I would say as a persecutor? Or are you relating as a creator, a challenger, or a coach? And then the newest part of our brain, which is the outer layer of our brain, is called the prefrontal cortex. And it's the newest relative to the other part. It's the newest relative to the other parts. And it's often referred to as the executive brain. And this is where decision-making is made. Now, if again, you're in a stress-induced state and the primitive brain is signaling danger, the emotion will be one of survival. And the executive brain could potentially make the decision to default to drama or to default to empowerment. And this is where choice is made. So this lines up to the third of the 3 vital questions, which is what actions are you taking? So all we have to do is simply, as my husband would say, just don't think that way. Now, if only it were that easy, right? Because if it were, I'd be out of a job. And there'd be so many of us that are stressed out and burned out, and we wouldn't even have to, all we need to do was switch a light on and we wouldn't think that way. Well, we know if we were to even take a look in this last 15 months, life just doesn't work that way. A lot of us are undergoing a higher level of stress and burnout than we ever have before. And there are some stats here that I wanted to share with you. Now, I know that we're all over the world here, but I just wanted to give you some stats here from the U.S. is that 78% of people have said that this pandemic has been a significant source of stress in their life. Like, no kidding. On top of this, we have been living in a world that rewards perfection. And as leaders, we may think that we need to get it, and I put it in quotation marks here, all right, all the time. And yet, as we have noticed with this pandemic, we live in a very imperfect and ever-changing world. So no wonder we're feeling burnt out, and depression and anxiety is now sort of like the 4th wave of this pandemic. Interesting to note is that depression alone is costing the U.S. $210 billion annually. And about 18% of the population in the U.S. alone are having anxiety disorders. So we can see that this is becoming a real national crisis. So that's why it's so important to start doing work around psychological safety and 3 vital questions so we can start, noticing and naming and start building some choices for ourselves and how we can move from victim to creator and how we can start creating that conversation. So recall in my last talk, I quickly reviewed this chart about hot buttons that create stress in our work environment and in an organization's culture. Now, this was a study that was done by Rund and Flanagan, and they found 9 hot buttons commonly experienced in the workplace. And when one of these is your hot button, it means that when another person does the behavior, somewhat like feeling unreliable or overly analytical or whatever, you get hot really quickly. In other words, you react. And you become angry or frustrated and irritated, and the behavior of the other person, you can fall into that DDT dynamic. So here's something to note. If you think about the science behind this and why we respond in such a strong internal and sometimes external emotion, it really kind of makes a lot of sense. Is that typically the hot buttons is actually centered around a really strong value or belief system that you have. And our hot buttons are hot because we perceive a threat to our identity or the value or our own interests. So let's just use an example. Let's just say someone is always late. You may have a strong value around accountability, around orderliness, or maybe connection. And as a result, when this person, which may not see lateness as a strong value, this may lead you to feel like a victim to their behavior, or all you want to do is persecute them for this behavior, and or maybe try to rescue the situation by doing the work for them in the hope that he or she will change that behavior. So just go to shifting your mindset from drama, oops, I guess I lost a letter there, there we go, making what happened, to empowerment in terms of making shifts happen is not necessarily easy, or not necessarily, it's a simple idea, but doesn't necessarily is easy. So I'm not here to tell you that it's simply about turning a light bulb on in your head and shifting your mindset. See, what there is that there's a gap, which I'll talk about it in a moment, that when we recognize it, we can learn to get curious about it and create a move forward action within that gap, which I call dynamic tension. So if we can see what that tension is and sit with that tension, we may be able to make some choices for ourselves that takes us out of the victim mode and the DDT and shift ourselves over to the empowerment or the champion mindset. So let's just talk about how to harness this dynamic tension. So the difference between what you say you want, which is basically the desired outcome, and the current reality that you have is referred to as the gap. So think about an elastic, and if you were to hold an elastic in your fingers, like in this drawing here, you'll notice that there's tension between the bottom, which is what we'll call the current reality, and the outcome, the desired outcome. And that's where that is, that dynamic tension. Now this term is borrowed from physics that describes a vigorous force that is actively pulling in opposite directions between the two opposing points. So the key to creating healthy outcomes versus staying in that vortex of problems lies in the ability to harness that dynamic tension between what you want and where you are right now. And when you feel that tension, that's when you have a choice to either collapse and fall back down into reverting to your default mode, which is the DDT, the victim, the persecutor, or the rescuer, or acknowledging the tension and work with it to propel you forward. And this dynamic tension can be both a source of overwhelm and it can be a dynamic energy that pulls you forward, manifesting more than you've ever dreamed. So the trick to learning to hold the tension is a source of forward-moving energy. And when you practice this, holding the tension supports the creative process and reduces the default drama patterns and allows the creative process to unfold one step at a time. So now you're probably saying, how the heck do I do that? I'm glad you asked me that, because this is what we're going to talk about now. So there's basically a 5-step action planning process to help you create action to get you to your desired outcome. So the first one is, first of all, just understanding what is your desired outcome. So when I work with individuals and in workshops or in retreats, sometimes I call it the destination postcard. And this destination postcard is a concept that describes the forward-moving energy and a planning structure that supports taking generative action steps. So in that destination postcard, the question is, what do you want? And if you had it, how would you know it? So having metrics in that destination postcard so you can measure just how far you've come is really important. And this step requires you to clarify what holds your heart and meaning for you and or for your organization. And then when you build from there, also understand what is your current reality. In other words, what do you have now? So this next step is to describe, without judgment, or blame your current reality. Where are you right now? And be really truthful about your situation. And again, this is not with judgment and beating yourself up. This is about just creating a realistic view of your current reality. And the more real you are with yourself, the better clarity you have to move forward. And then, so this step really aligns with the challenger role in the empowerment dynamic. Sometimes we call it the truth teller. And this is not always easy because human nature leans towards interpreting a situation through highly personal stories and previous experiences, and sometimes we beat ourselves up over that. And so it can really, which can skew the truth of the matter. So here are a few questions that are useful in this second step. What is true that I am not yet facing? What is missing in my description of current reality? Is there anything that I am avoiding? And how might others describe the situation? So again, I use a lot of different tools in this part of the process. Sometimes I'll use a wellness wheel or a wheel of life. A lot of other consultants and clients use those 360 model and or the business wheel. So there's a lot of ways that can help bring clarity around what your current reality is right now. And then from there, we can also look at what supports your current outcome, or sorry, what supports your desired outcome. So look at what is working for you and your organization, because we know that we really over-recognize and spend a lot of time on what isn't working. So this is your opportunity to recognize what is working and really amp the volume up around it so you can build upon that. Also, look at who, what, when, where, and what's in your toolbox. I call it your tickle trunk for supports. And there are plenty out there if we can just open our minds and expand and see them. From there, what inhibits our outcome? And I call these the hurdles or the course corrections that we want to be proactive about so we can, like I said, course correct as we move along. And again, I'm going to keep emphasizing this. It's really, really important to stay curious here and avoid judgment. And here's something to note. The brain cannot be in judgment mode and curiosity mode at the same time. So when you are here and those inner critics and judgment statements show up, just take a breather, excuse me, and ask yourself, what is here to get curious about? And again, some tools that I use is like our circles of control, our circle of influence, and what's outside of our control. And we talk a lot about that, so again, it helps clients bring clarity about what is within their control and what is outside of their control. I also do a lot of work around who are your inner critics? Who are those gremlins inside of you that want to say yes, but? I have a program called Champion Mindset that's online, and you're more than welcome to take a look at it. It's an online program that can really help you identify that, which will help you to get curious about this 5-step action plan. And last but not least is, what's next? What are the baby steps that you want to take, like little mini goals that will help you to move forward to reach your desired outcome? So I always say, what is the 1% that you can focus on right now that can help you in a move forward action? So here's what I mean. Many of my clients can identify themselves in this all or nothing mentality. So if they can't do it all right now, they fall into the dreaded drama triangle, and they feel they can't do it at all, and then they just drop it. So when you start working on baby steps and just being 1% better than what you were before, something incredible happens. And there is magic in knowing you only need to take one baby step that is yours to do, not someone else's. And taking action utilizes the tension and feeds your creativity. It also helps relieve stress when you let go of having to do or to know the whole plan before you take that one baby step. So without really noticing it, I find this fascinating that my clients start to evolve past habits and practices that were not serving them. And they take their goals in these little small bite-sized pieces, baby steps, and see how they're able to accomplish them, which gives them more empowerment to take the next step and the next step and so on. Just going to take a quick little drink here. Okay. So the secret to working with the dynamic tension and the gap within that between what you say you want, in other words, your desired outcome, and what you really have, which is your current reality, is holding the tension as a source of forward energy rather than stress. So if you see it as stress, overwhelm follows. And then you run the risk of defaulting to one of the dreaded drama triangle roles of victim, persecutor, or rescuer. So to ease the tension when stuck in a victim mentality, and again, just know that you're not alone in this, because this tends to be our default. Just notice is that to ease the tension, if you're stuck in the victim mentality, you may give up easily or compromise your vision as a way to relieve the tension. And so without judgment, just get curious about that and ask yourself, is this, what's here to learn? Am I feeling anxious? What is showing up for me? Am I wanting to give up because of that tension? And just stay in that feeling. And again, working with a coach is really helpful because then you can get really curious about what's showing up for you. So let's just say you are in that drama triangle. And if you're a persecutor, you may find ways to compete or blame or to try to be right to control the tension. And if you are default to a rescuer, you may want to jump at the first solution to fix the situation, all under the heading of being helpful. And again, it is a way to sort of to lessen the dynamic tension that is showing up for you. Now, I want to explain something here. While this model tends to be an easy and simple idea of how to move forward to reach your goals, the reality is that the plans rarely go in a straight line. I'm sure we've all had that experience. It tends to look a little bit more like this. And this is the reality and really very normal. So you will most likely go through many different iterations and gaps between your current reality and your desired outcome. And if you see this as normal and that dynamic tension is part of the process versus an anomaly, then you're going to be able to embrace these with curiosity and a champion mindset. So think about this. There's two metaphors that illustrate my point. So a kite cannot fly unless it has wind blowing in its face to thrust it upward. And a sailboat is dead in the water if there's not wind blowing and filling its sails, propelling it forward. So you can see how there is the importance around dynamic tension to help things flow and grow. So in the summary here, when you feel powerless in a situation and notice that that victim mentality is bubbling up inside, rather than resist it or tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way, allow yourself to simply notice the situation. What triggered the feeling? What was the situation, person, or condition? Is this a reoccurring pattern or a one-time event? What might this sense of victimization be telling you? And when you feel the persecutor energy emerge, you may need to legitimately defend or protect yourself or another, like a mama bear protecting her cubs, fending off a threat, may be the most appropriate response to a situation. Identifying what you are willing to fight for and can tell you a lot about your deepest values. And when the rescuer in you shows up and you feel the desire to insert yourself into areas that are none of your business, what does this say about your relationships? And what do you really care about? And ask yourself, is my desire to rescue hinged upon my hope that others will say nice things about me? And if so, your rescuing behavior is more about you rather than the good deed that you plan to do. And this distinction is essential to understand and can make the difference between helping others so they will think well of you or because you genuinely want to be of service. Now, you may have heard the old adage of what you resist persists. And when you're in the DDT roles, when your DDT roles appear, it is an opportunity to observe old patterns that have persisted and may have once served you, but are now outdated and ineffective. So by making friends with your DDT roles, you will gain new clues around your once brilliant behavior that evolved in response to earlier life challenges. So rather than avoiding the DDT roles and wishing they would simply go away, embrace your drama as evidence of something new that wants to emerge. And this is how you can create a healthy dynamic tension and shift over to a champion mindset, to creator, to challenger, and to coach. So what I want to do here now is there are commonly asked questions that I get. And the number one question that I get around this, and I think this was asked of me in the first, either the first talk or the second talk, is this. What do I do about someone who is stuck in the victim mindset? So here's what I want to ask you in the chat box. So when I'm in, actually, we don't have, it's 1:45 now, so I'm not going to ask you to do this, but I'll just tell you about some responses that I've received when I've done workshops. So when I'm in workshops where there's more interaction, I typically ask the question back to the audience. When you are around someone stuck in the victim mindset, what do you do? And here are some of the responses that I've gotten, all in confidence, of course. I make suggestions that will help fix their complaint. I disengage and silently say to myself, oh, there they are in that victim mode again. Or I do my best to listen and show up with empathy. Or I just let them complain and complain and complain, which tends to really negatively affect my mood. So these are some of the responses that I've gotten in other workshops. So, oops, I don't know what just happened there. Uh-oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. Here we are. So when we are working with people in a victim mindset, it can be exhausting and infuriating. And when they have a problem, they often prefer to complain or blame rather than focus on the situation or the solution, correct? And they cope with life by thinking there is some force outside of them that prevents them from taking charge of their life. And then this approach to life leads to, again, that dreaded drama triangle and its role of victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And the victim mindset is the thinking behind all three of those roles of reactivity. So the good news here is that you can greatly influence someone to grow beyond their victim thinking. However, sooner or later, I have to say that you must face the fact that you cannot make, and I put in capital letters here, you cannot make someone change. For the person really stuck, here are a few suggestions that will help influence them. So here is my survivor's guide to the perpetual victim. So first of all, drop the victim label. If you put others in the victim box, whatever you say, you may hear as evidence of their victim thinking. To connect with this person, stop being overly virtuous about how they are such a victim and you aren't. Instead, shift to how you see them. They are creators in their own right, whether they act like it or know it themselves. And if you truly believe and really know that their true essence is that of a creator, you will start treating them differently and may very well be surprised that it might encourage them to also realize it for themselves. Second, connect rather than collude. So there is a misconception that to connect with someone stuck in the victim mindset, you need to share your own victim story. So sometimes there's that one-upmanship. Have you ever seen that? Like, oh, you know, I gained 15 pounds during COVID. Oh, yeah? Well, I gained 30 pounds during COVID. So sometimes there's sort of that one-upmanship. So this approach, like I said, this approach encourages people to one-up each other, trying to amplify their story more than others. Instead, let them know you understand their feelings and complaints. Suggestions might be, that must be difficult, or I understand your frustration. I hear what you're saying about whatever's showing up for them. And also, stay away from yes, but, and you're about to make a suggestion for them, and encourage yes and comments, and sort of guide them into moving forward opportunities. So you feel the difference there? I'll just pretend you're all nodding your head right now. And the last one is support action. So don't give advice. When a person is in a victim mindset, when a person with a victim mindset seeks advice, it may not be because they want to take responsibility for their life. And they may want you to be a rescuer and are looking for evidence of your attention. So instead, ask them to identify what is one baby step that they can take in a move forward. How can they create from this situation? And please be patient. Once they select an action step, just, you know, depending on how close you are, work with them. Maybe if you're a manager and you have somebody working with you and you see this happening, set up a time for follow-up and make sure that you keep that commitment. And it will show them that you care while increasing the chance that they will follow through. And you can encourage accountability in a positive way with an occasional check-in via email or a text to say, hey, curious about how things went with that last baby step you committed to. Here's the reality. We all need support from time to time. So transforming the victim mindset is a journey, and it may take a while. So just remember that you are learning to work with someone stuck in the victim mindset because you really want to support that person, not to judge them or to fix them. And you too may need that support one day because we all move through the victim mindset from time to time. And practice most what you want others to do with you in those times. So in conclusion, we reviewed a lot in this three-part series. The bottom line, a psychologically safe and supportive work environment reduces the prevalence, severity, impact, and duration of drama. And furthermore, organizations that make the effort to create a psychologically healthy workplace are much more likely to have a healthier, happier employee and are likely to reap the benefits in productivity, sustainability, retention, and growth. So understanding that there are different levels of psychological safety and moving through those levels will greatly enhance the level of trust within the culture of the organization. And we also reviewed the three vital questions. What actions are you and or the organization taking? Are actions merely reactions to the problem of the day, or are they generative in creating outcomes and results while solving problems in the service of the organization's mission and vision? There is also, how are you relating? Then what actions are you taking? And we also talked about the hot buttons and noticing and naming what your buttons are with pure curiosity. And then we talked about shifting from DDT to the TED, to the empowerment dynamic, through that dynamic tension. And so that was introduced today as a structure for learning to take action that provides momentum toward moving closer to and getting clearer about envisioned and desired outcomes. And when you stay in that tension, you learn to tackle problems and choose a healthier response to obstacles when they arise, while always keeping your focus on your outcomes. So as I mentioned, that was a Reader's Digest version of a lot of stuff that, that I do with organizations and with individuals. And if you are looking for deeper learning around either individual work or corporate work around mental, physical, emotional well-being, please don't hesitate to reach out. Call and book to discuss any possible workshops and or keynotes with your organization. Reach out to me. Again, I'm at info@changechamp.ca, or you can just reach me through my website at changechamp.ca. So I really want to thank you for your engagement around all of this 3 parts that we've done. And again, if you are looking for more help or want to deepen your learning around any of the work that I do, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you very much. Now over to you, Shilpa.
So thank you so much, and this is now time for our comments and questions. So I'm going to read a question to you. That in a 5-step action planning process, how should we deal with undesirable results whilst a baby step is in progress?
Well, first of all, it's about getting really curious about the situation, because the thing is that I call this course correction. Because what we think would have been the, the quote-unquote perfect step in that situation, when we've gone through it, we may realize that it may not always be the best step. So this is when we just have to really notice the name and just pause what is showing us for us. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I'm having a hard time hearing this. Thank you. So this is about course correcting. So think about it, and I told you guys earlier that my brother is a pilot with Southwest Airlines. And if you think about a jet or an airline or a plane, and they're trying to get you from, let's say, Nova Scotia to Arizona. Well, the reality is, my brother always puts it on autopilot or whatever. And the reality is that the plane is not always going in a straight line. It is constantly course correcting left and right, up and down, and so on. So it's always doing that, even if it's on what they call autopilot. So the reality is that we are always going to have situations that are not always going to go our way. It's how are we going to respond to the situation when that happens. And that's where course correction is really vital. And having that support system to see what are some other ideas that we can take to create another opportunity to sort of dig ourselves out of that certain situation. So hopefully that helps answer your question there a little bit. Any other questions?
Yes, we do have another question. So in the traditional companies, we have toxic leadership or better toxic management, and how do we deal with it?
Well, that's a huge question and not always a simple answer. I always say that a lot of this work happens at the top, and there needs to be buy-in at the top. So there is a choice that can be made. There's lots of choices that the individual can make. That it really is going to be up to the person to decide if they want to stay with that that organization, if there is that toxic environment, and there isn't an opportunity to shift, the organization is not willing to make some shifts within the culture. There's also ways that can be done. And again, it's a big question, but there are ways that you can kind of slowly but surely shift the mindset. I call it stealth mode. It's about creating sort of an environment that people don't necessarily know what's happening, but they're noticing something is shifting. one of the things that I said at the very first talk was that shifting culture within an organization is like shifting a destroyer in a bathtub. It takes time, and it does take intention. So if there is that situation that is showing up for you in that organization, is there anybody that you can speak to about how to shift? Is there anybody you can speak to about how to bring work like this into your organization? So you can start bringing awareness and start, kind of sparking that conversation within that organization.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Now I'm going to be concluding the webinar because it's just 3 minutes before the hour. This is the listing of our upcoming webinars. And if you haven't joined the ASQ yet, please consider it. If you go to my ASQ and then scroll down to events, you'll find the listing of the webinars. If you go to my ASQ and then into communities and technical communities under the quality management division, you'll find much useful information. And it is now time to end the program for today. I want to thank our presenter Anne-Marie Flynn one more time, and to each one of you for attending and participating in today's program. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.